My sermon this morning, some asked, well, why have you incorporated balloons into your sermon? And the person I blame is an old pastor who passed away a couple of years ago now. His name was Pastor Ken Mead. Some of you older people may know of him. He used to be a youth pastor years ago. Apparently he came to Mildura when he was burnt out, and they sent him to Mildura to recover. He came there, and he used to come and visit our family regularly and do worship with us. But as a 4-year-old, I remember him preaching and painting. He was an excellent painter, and he would preach a sermon and paint at the same time. Now, I'm not a painter, but I can do balloons. I thought, and I as a 4-year-old, I saw the 4-year-old and the 99-year-old all paying attention and involved, and I thought, well, if I can preach anything like that, I'll give it a go. So that's where balloons are kicked in, thanks to Pastor Ken Mead. In fact, to me as a 4-year-old with his painting. I guess being in children's ministries and reading the research, what it tells me is that we're losing between 50 and, in most cases, in smaller country churches, 90% of children who go to our schools, go to our churches, go to our Sabbath schools, for some reason choose not to embrace the faith. Now, that's across the board. That stat worries me, because what it tells me is that with my 2 kids, I'm going to lose one of them. And the question I asked myself when both my kids were little was, which one do I want to lose? My daughter or my son? And my answer to myself was neither, because if I get to heaven and my 2 aren't there, then I would see my entire ministry as a failure. Now, I know that I love what I do and I love reaching kids, but my 2 kids are my first ministry. My family is my first ministry. And so that drove me to the research, it drove me to my knees, it drove me to the scripture, and asking the question, is there anything that we can do to make faith sticky so that our kids, instead of being more likely to leave, are more likely to stay? Now, I guess that's my selfish reason for doing it. Now, when you read the scriptures and look at the stats, there's no absolute guarantee. Right from the start, God made us with free choice. So we can raise our kids with the best morals, the best programs, the best parenting, and they can still choose to go and do their own thing, go and do it their own way. And often when I preach these sorts of sermons, I get to the door and I have so many parents who say, I wish I'd heard that sermon 40 years earlier. But I'll say, look, there's no guarantee. But I want to say right at the start that research is also saying what brings kids back when they do leave. And the main research I'm reading, and what the main points are, is that if we pray, number 1, for our kids that are left. Number 2, maintain your morals, maintain your rituals, maintain what you believe in and do. Continue to set that example is important. And number 3, maintain a non-judgmental, non-anxious presence, you know what I mean? Which means that you don't want to become preachy, you don't want to judge what they're doing, you want to love them unconditionally. They know what's right, they know what it is. And you've got to remember that God's story of love, grace and reconciliation isn't over yet. He's still telling the story through our children. So right from the start, let me say that there's no guarantee that this works, but these are some things that are more likely to tip the odds in our favour. So I guess that's what I want to go through briefly. I guess also I was saying earlier, there's a lot of research coming out recently that's talking about this, and I know your church involved in the growing young cohort. That's bringing a lot of research to bear as well. But the forerunner of growing young was Sticky Faith written by Cara Powell and Chap Clark out of Fuller Institute, who are both involved in growing young. So I've read that and absorbed that and looked at that and said, okay, what can I take from that as I've looked at all the research and what it's saying. And so what it's saying is that there are 7 things, if we can do these reasonably well, 7 things that are more likely to turn the tables in our favour in keeping our kids. The big key, number 1, that comes out of this is find safe mentors. Mentoring is huge when it comes to keeping our kids. Lifeway Research did some research on mentoring, and what they found was that if we can put 1 extra mentor into the life of our children, who know them by name, who affirm them, who are a bit like adopted uncle or auntie, that's beside mum and dad, 1 extra mentor, that child is 26% more likely to stay in the church just by having a mentor. Now, if we can up that to 5 mentors, that's pretty easy to think about when you look at the church. A Pathfinder leader, a youth leader, a Sabbath school leader, an adopted uncle or auntie in the church, add in a deacon or a deaconess or another person in the church, and you get to that 5 fairly quickly. So the church is the ideal village to do this. If they are involved in these children, know those children by name, affirm them and speak into their lives, that number doubles to 46%. Now, I'll take that as a dad. Now, here's the thing when it comes to mentoring. It's not putting in place this special mentoring program. And at some point we think, let's find a program that encourages mentoring. No, the research I'm reading says it's what they call the ad hoc mentoring. It's the rubbing shoulders mentoring that happens in the foyer here, that happens out there in front, it happens in the Pathfinder camps and things that go on. So it's not so much you want those intentional mentors, but it's the casual mentoring, the village that surrounds our kids that grows them and keeps them in the church. So if I want my kids to learn values, if I want my kids to learn what it means to be a Christian, if I want them to learn what Jesus looks like, mentors communicate that powerfully than any Bible story. Kids will not remember the stories they're told in Sabbath school, but they'll remember the people that told those stories, and that's the difference. My story of why I'm here as a balloon twisting children's pastor, not some miraculous conversion experience, but it's people who invested in me. My uncle Lionel, he was head deacon in Mildura Church, and as a 7-year-old, I used to follow him around. Must have annoyed him looking back because I was everywhere with him, putting up the blinds and putting out the ordnance bowls and helping him collect the offering, and anything he did, I did. But Uncle Lionel never told me once to go away. And here I am. My chaplain, Rob Robe, again, a great storyteller, I'm told. I don't remember a single story told in chapel. But he played cricket at recess time and soccer at lunchtime and was with the guys in the paddock, and the girls, I'm sure, as chaplain. And I saw Jesus in him. My grade prep teacher, Miss French, who turned into Mrs. Malika, she's just retired, but she was my prep 1 and 2 teacher. Again, I don't remember what she taught, although I must have learned something because I can count and I can say ABC. But more importantly, she showed me Jesus in the classroom, and here I am. Pathfinder leader, Spotty we called him, Kevin Silver. He was a pathfindering guru and used to take my brother Lauren and myself out bird banding in the bush. would catch birds in nets of all things, and you'll put a band on them. And then months later or years later, sometimes you'll find out where the bird ended up. And it sort of was establishing the distribution of these birds. As we walked through the bush, he talked. Now looking back, I'd probably say, well, that's pretty unsafe, but these days I wouldn't allow it to happen. But he took my brother and myself, and we spent most Sundays with him doing that. And as he walked, he talked. And I saw Jesus in Spotty, Pastor Kevin Silver. And I could list you tons of people who are the cloud of witnesses that invested in me. And here I stand. So my challenge to Foresters Beach Church is, who are the people in your family's village? Now here's where we tip the scales in our favour, especially when it comes to broken families or families that are experiencing issues, or single parent families, and I guess we all have issues in the end. When there's issues happening at home, that's when the church family comes into its own, that mentoring family. So when things were tough at home for me, I knew I could lean on one of these other mentors and be theirs. There was one lady, Thelma. She was, her husband Joe used to run farms, and he got into Revelation seminars, and he was a Revelation seminar guru and moved up this way. He's now still alive, and he's out Narrabri. But Joe and his wife Thelma, they had one adopted girl. Joe and Thelma called me their boy. That's all they said was, how's my boy? So when I walked into church, I got greeted with, how's my boy? Now, I thought that was just said to me. But then I find later on, it was said to a whole lot of others. But the fact that Thelma would say, my boy, created belonging for me. So find safe mentors, number one. Intentionally or unintentionally, place 5 mentors into their life. Involve children in church with you. Here's again the thing. What they're finding is parents who are busy in the rooms out here or whatever else in church, and the kids are there with them. There's something about parents being involved and children and faith transmission. Now, often the kids are running around wherever else, but they're there with their parents. And when parents volunteer, the kids are more likely to stay. There's a whole lot of research around volunteering with parents. Adopt a grandparent. Again, loneliness is one of the biggest factors in our society today. Our kids are lonely because they're connected on a screen, but not often connected to other people. And so there's a loneliness kicking in there. And often the screen communication is a placebo effect for genuine connection. Our older people are often lonely because often their family are moved away for work, whatever else. And so there's a loneliness factor at both ends. And adopting a grandparent is a great way to provide mutual benefits. There's so much research around what adopting a grandparent does for the grandparent, let alone what it does for the adopted grandchild, around all sorts of things to do with health and longevity and less depression, all those sorts of things. And finally, set up a network of prayer warriors for your children. Julie Westlake, some of you might know her, she used to be the Children's Ministries at Division. She's now retired on Norfolk Island, bless her. Oh, what a lovely place to retire to. But she's over there. But she tells a story of her daughter Emma. Emma was one of her 4 kids I think she's got. Emma's one of the older ones. And when my brother Brendan began ministering at Papatoe, she was right in the throes of those early teen years. And so Julie asked Brendan, can you be a prayer warrior for my daughter Emma? Brendan said, sure, I'll put my list and I'll pray for her every day. So that's what he did. Well, Emma ended up leaving the church and going to college, and Brendan said, so can I finish now? And now she's gone to college, and Julie said, no, she needs prayer now more than ever. So please pray for my Emma. So Brendan kept praying for Emma. Anyway, time goes on and she left college and got a job, and Brendan said, I can stop praying now, she's got a job. No, she needs help, she needs prayer. Please keep praying. And so then years go on and Emma finally gets married. Brendan says, now's my time to stop praying. No, you need to pray for their marriage, you need to keep praying for my daughter. So Brendan now for the past 20 years has been praying for Emma. And Emma still goes to church, she's still involved, and Brendan is still the prayer warrior for her. So, yeah, find safe mentors, number one. Let's try number two. Number two, again, works really well for our children and keep them in the church, which is create family memories. Create family memories. Planning things like a special holiday together, or declaring one night a week, family night in. There we go. We keep going forward and you'll find me. We're on gift number two. Create special traditions around holidays and yearly events on the calendar. Celebrate milestones and rites of passage, and declare family meals a not to be missed event. Again, when children, and I'm sure you think back to your family years growing up, you'll think of some of the special events that your family did together. There's so much research around regular family meals. That's having a family meal 3, 4, 5 times a week, where everyone goes around the table and technology is turned off. That includes you, Dad. Work is not so important, and I'm talking to myself here as well, that you can't turn your phone off for a family meal. And so you declare technology to be put to one side. Often what you do is you can stack up your mobile phones in the centre of the table like a tower, and that becomes the centrepiece. But the rule is, whoever touches their mobile phone first does the dishes. Now, I can tell you it works, but also it's often Dad that ends up doing the dishes. I don't mind that because of what it does for the family. So what they're finding is that families, it's not so much the food, but it's the slow meal and the slow conversation that happens around the table, the bickering sometimes, that speaks into these children's lives. And if families do regular meals 4 to 5 times a week, those kids are likely to do better at school. I'll take that as a dad. The kids are more likely to adopt the values of the family. I'll take that as a dad. The children are more likely to not get involved in at-risk activities. Now, I'll take that as a dad as well. And again, Google this, and you can see the research around the power of the family meal, but also the memory events of going away together, the holidays, the camps and things that you do, special traditions. One thing that's experiencing revival right now in homes, and something to think about, is the power of board games. Now something, oh come on, electronics, all the things now, but no. Board games are experiencing a resurgence. There's actually gaming shops opening up with all new board games because Kickstarter campaigns have allowed board games to kick in again. There's all sorts of games. I dare you to get a game and play it with your family called Exploding Kittens, of all things. we've played it. It's worth getting and playing. It's funny. It's worth reading it and getting it and playing together. Or what's the other one we played recently? Muffin Time. These are new board games on the market that are great games that you can play with the entire family. And there's so much research now coming out around what board games does for families that electronic games cannot do for families. Or if you've got to play electronic games, then play them with your children. Don't allow them to lock themselves in the room, but get some good strategy electronic games and play them together as well. For the church, it's celebrate memory events. Create special memory events that families can attend. Things like what you did today there, the group that did the rotation with the kids. That's a memory event that will stick with those kids. It's something different, it's something that's powerful, and it's something that is faith-forming for them. Celebrate the milestones in the lives of the children in your church. Things like celebrating when they go to school or when they give their heart to Jesus. We have something for that. Or when they get into year 12, all those sorts of things. There's various events you can build where you celebrate the milestones in the children in your church. Provide adventurers and pathfinder clubs. Again, there's Wayne French did a whole PhD on pathfinders and memory events and what that does for our kids. Pathfinders is huge, probably the best mentoring, memory event making event we have on the planet, because every 4 years they go to a huge camporee, number one, but then it's all the Pathfinder camps and the club events and the hikes and the honours and things you do in the meantime that are mini memory events. And so it's a natural memory event builder in the lives of our children. And I encourage parents, as many parents as possible, to volunteer in Pathfinders, because it's the volunteering alongside those children in Pathfinders that has an effect on the children as well. And of course, the conference runs Big Camp and other special events for our children as well. By the way, Big Camp, well, Little Camp, some sort of a camp will be on next year. I am already planning for a children's segment for that, so there will be some have asked, well, is there anything for the children? Yes, there will be a morning program for the children. It'll be different to normal programs, but there will be something special for the children in the morning and an intergenerational worship program in the evenings. It's going to go for a shorter time, COVID willing, but yeah, Big Camp, Little Camp is on. And hopefully our normal Big Camp will be back next year. Let's try gift 3. Let's go forward. And gift 3 is spend quality time with your children. Children spell love as Time. And children are more likely than not to adopt the values and the faith they see in their parents. That's scary for me as a dad. It's not the faith they see on Sabbath. It's the faith they see in my marriage with my wife, Lisa. It's a faith they see when I've had a really hard day at the office and feel like just throwing it all in, going back to Mildura and pick grapes. It was so much easier. It's that sort of faith. When chips are down, when things are wrong, when you've really had a hard day, how does God work for you then? That's what our kids want to see. And how does God work for me in my marriage with Lisa? How does God work for me in my hobby time, in my Googling time, in my time I spend outside of work? That's the faith, and that's what the monarchs see. But also, time with our children has a powerful effect on their identity, their self-identity, number one, and also has a powerful effect on their faith and their belief, and also on their values and their picture of God. So it's not so much the event you do as a family or with this child, it's it's a journey. So I still date my children, though Andrew's now left home and Madison's in second year of nursing. I still do dates with them where I take them on a date and we go for the journey. And yeah, it's a talk in the car. The grunts and the hums and the listening that speaks volumes because you took the time just for them. And in this busy world, I think that COVID has communicated something to us in that we can stop, we can slow down. We've been forced to. And I think that our children are going to thank us for it down the track. My daughter and I, we actually grew a veggie patch. Now, I've always planted a veggie patch, but my daughter got involved in the veggie patch because nothing else to do, really. And so she got involved in the backyard. She discovered that there was a backyard, which she never had before. Those sorts of things have happened, and the board games, and the things that we did, cooking and slow life together. And I think the kids have really valued some of that slow life and need to find ways to slow down and take the time. One way to do that is create shared hobbies and interests that you can do together, or go on a trip together. Often it's a driving in the car and alongside each other where a lot of things can be said. And often it's not the journey to the event, it's a journey home where the talk really happens. So on the way down, it's often Madison's giving one-word answers, and on the way back, it's often me giving one-word answers because I can't get any other words in because then she starts talking flat out. So it often takes the time before your children start to talk. So never give up striving for the right relationship with your children. Now, you pick that slide again. What does the church do? Don't fill up the family's spare time with extra church activities. In other words, program less so families can do more together. Sabbath afternoon sometimes might be the only time that a family get to be together. So don't think you have to fill up all of their Sabbaths with things that the church does, but encourage families to do things together, or else set up events for families to be together, like a church picnic or a church bike ride or a church walk somewhere or whatever. Places where families can be together in a larger group as well. Make your ministries and programs intergenerational. So often in some churches, and not so much in Adventist churches, but in others, the family can arrive at the church door and then divide and go to their own programs and never be together as a family until they're in the car going home again. There's so much research around intergenerational connections and what that does for our kids. That's why I guess I'm moving towards intergenerational preaching, where I preach to the youngest to the oldest so that even the children feel like they belong. But intergenerational seems to be, according to Sticky Faith research and to Growing Young, one of the keys to growing our kids spiritually is to involve them in intergenerational worship. In fact, when Sticky Faith looked at finding the silver bullet, they called it, of what kept our kids, it was intergenerational worship, they said, that came the closest to it. That's where we all worship together. Now, we as a church have kept our family worship going. Other churches, my Sunday keeping friend churches, are now wanting to move back to intergeneration because they did their Sunday schools at the same time as their church worship. And when the kids came through the Sunday schools and got to the youth group and finished youth group, they didn't feel like they belonged over there, and so they shelved their faith and left because they never felt they belonged in the big church. So they're now trying to go back and get that intergenerational worship back, and they're having a hard time doing it. We as a church have never abandoned our family worship, and neither should we ever abandon the families worshipping together. We just need to make sure that it is relevant so that everyone who comes feels like they belong in worship. So that's a big plus for us as Adventists, is that we're already down the road towards that. Celebrate the families in your church as well. Make sure that we celebrate the fact that we do have families, and that, find ways to celebrate them together in church. Number 4 is love God. Let your children catch you. Children are more likely to adopt the faith of their parents than not. Vern Bankston, if you move that slide forward another one. Vern Bankston did research all his life, and he just published it a couple of years ago on families. And he studied Christian families, he studied other like Hindus and Muslims, and he studied atheists. And his whole life PhD research was studying the generations in these families. So he did 40 years or more of just studying the different generations and sitting down and interviewing them. So he got, I think he touched on 7 or 8 generations by the time he'd finished, and he was able to interview each of those generations and watch these kids grow up and watch them have kids and even watch some of them have kids. So he did a whole lot of research around this, and he wanted to look at faith transmission and how it worked in families. And when it all boiled down, what he found was that if you take everything into account, the children are more likely to adopt the same level of faith as their parents had. That's comforting in some ways, but also scary, because how can I be more faithful in front of my children and let them catch me being that sort of person? So make sure that you practice the spiritual disciplines. Call your family to prayer and worship. I've just written a resource for younger families. Worship in a box. I have some in the car if you're really interested in having a look at that. What it is a way to show families how to do worship in their home. I tell the parents what to say, how to say it, what questions to ask. I've broken it down into a number of simple worships that families can do. I wrote it. It was meant to be released at Big Camp this year. We're going to run an international worship in the Connection Tent. And I was working with Norm Hurlow to look after that, and Bethany Chapman, a few others, and we'd put this worship in a box together. The idea was that each day in the worship there'll be a different feature in the box we'd talk about. Then at the end, the parents could take the box home. So they'd take Big Camp home with them. That was the whole idea. But God had other plans, and the worship in a box actually went online, and we did worships at Easter time, family camp at home. And we released the worship in the box after that. And so it went, bless the whole of the AUC and probably beyond as well, not just North and South Wales. But I do have boxes, and the idea is that we assume that families know how to do worship, but often they don't, because they never had it modelled to them. And the research around Adventists is about 30% or less do family worship of any description in their home. This is a short, punchy worship showing parents how to do it, based around finding Jesus, which is the theme of it. So, yeah, that's there for those that want to do that. But yeah, doing a short family worship is a powerful way to pass on faith and let kids see your faith in action. Let your children see how God works for you in the good times and especially the tough times. Be involved in church and capture the daily God moments that happen. There's a booklet here on God moments and how you can help your kids to capture where God showed up in their life today. and often when the kids can claim a God moment. It's a powerful growth motivator for our kids. We can tell our kids all about the faith, we can tell them the stories, we can teach them memory verses, but until they experience God for themselves, it doesn't make much sense. So helping them realise where God impacts their life is a powerful way to make faith sticky as well. Now, it's interesting that a lot of these times happen at the memory bank. See how this is a bit of a web that I'm creating here? There's not just one distinct bit, but it's often when they're at a Pathfinder camporee, or they're up on a high mountain with you, or they're at some other powerful memory event, or a week of prayer at school. It's often where God will speak to them. And helping them capture that and claim that and unpack that is a powerful way of making faith real and sticky for them. So that means we're being involved in helping them to unpack the God moments that happen in their life almost on a daily basis. Gift number, of course, for the church, or that one, it is equip parents. The best thing churches can do to make faith sticky in this area is to equip parents to be the best that they can be. Find ways to send faith home on a regular basis with your family. So what I encourage when I'm Sabbath school to do is to have a drive time question or a lunchtime question that the kids take home to unpack with their parents, and make sure the parents know about it too, so that what you're talking about at Sabbath school is actually driven home as well. This is where summer camps this year, again, COVID has forced us to do things differently. And so we have to have the parents need to come and camp, the family need to come and camp at Stewart's Point, because the kids will be with their parents for sleeping and for breakfast and for dinner. And so other times they're activities or they're in the night program. So I talked to Dan and I said, well, what if we were to take the families on the same journey as the junior kids are on, or as teen kids are on at summer camp? And so I've written a resource around worships and questions and parenting tips based on what the speaker is talking on at summer camp. So the parents will go on the same journey as the children are on, and hopefully when that child makes a decision at summer camp, the parents are on the same page as what the kids are on. And yeah, so my job at summer camp will be chaplain to the families who are camping at Stewart's Point while the kids are off on activities. So I get to eat all the fruitcake and other things that families might have to offer, and I'll visit them, and yeah, we'll take the families on the same journeys the kids are on. And I think that hopefully maybe God's showing us something different that hopefully is more powerful, to equip parents to be the best parents they possibly can be. Okay, gift number 5. We go forward on the next 2 slides. Next one. Tell awesome stories. There's so much research around story and the impact it has on our children. Children need to hear stories. Stories give our children the weapons they need to defeat the dragons. And let me tell you, there's some real dragons out there wanting to bring our kids down. But what we've found is that, and again, I've written a booklet there on the power of story and what that research around that, what that does for our children. They say that children need to hear some different levels of stories. Number 1 is the Bible story, of course. How has God worked in history through the Bible? So we need to tell those stories. But number 2, the stories of the early church. George Mueller and Florence Nightingale and some of those sorts of stories that are around. Kids need to hear those. Tell the stories of your denomination. Why does the Adventist church exist? And what is our story? Growing up again in my family, Mum chose to read to us every Friday night. Again, Friday night was our family night in. We didn't go to youth fellowship, we didn't go anywhere. We all were home, the whole 6 of us, gathered around Mum's bed, or Dad's bed, Mum and Dad's bed, and we'd all be there, and sometimes the coal would be under the edge of the doona, and Mum would read to us from a book called The Angel Said Australia, written by Ross Goldstone, and it tells the story of the Adventist church in Australia. And as Mum told that story, I found myself in that story. I was a part of it. I walked those streets. I put that picket on, that little leaflet on the picket down in Melbourne. I was out there on the paddle steamer with the steeds in Broken Hill, etc., etc. So, yeah, as those stories were told, I felt like I was a part of that story. And that's why I guess the union's now releasing those books, the Angel Said Australia children's books. I told one this morning, Full Steam Ahead, which is one of those books that you can grab from Better Books and Food, that tell the denominational, not just the American denominational story, but the Australian denominational story as well. And you tell his stories of your local church. Why does Foresters Beach Church exist? What's this about the Entrance Church? What's this about Erina Church? Who planted those churches, and what are the stories of your church down through the years? Even the story of how this church here was built sounds like a pretty amazing story, and a lot of miracles in the process. So kids need to hear your local church story. Tell those stories. But most importantly, tell your story. Why are you a Christian? Why are you an Adventist Christian? And where has God come through for you? Tell those stories. As I said, stories give our children the weapons they need to defeat the dragons. I was reading researchers recently that looked at now they can do brain research, and they actually hooked up the brain of a storyteller, and they hooked up the brains of the kids who were listening to the story and looked at the brain patterns, and what they found was that the storyteller's brain pattern and the children's brain pattern actually synced with the same brain pattern. Like the story that was being told, they said, was being actually experienced by the children who were listening to the story, and the brains all synced up. A lot of research around the power of story and what it does. So what it means is when we tell God's story, those children are connecting, syncing in with God's story and experiencing that story. They're in the furnace with Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. They're crossing the Red Sea with Moses. All those things, they're experiencing that. And if we continue to tell these stories, the children are more likely to find their place in that story and continue on that story. That's my story. So, of course, for the church, is prioritise your Sabbath schools, prioritise your pathfinders, make sure that you do find time to tell those stories on different levels. That makes faith sticky. Number 6. Go forward to the next one. Yep. One of my favourite ones is love your spouse and show it. There's a whole lot of research on the power of marriage and what that does for our children. It says, hug and kiss your spouse actually, I want to give you a tip today. This is from John Gottman, who has done a whole lot of research around marriage, and he's probably the marriage guru. And John Gottman, if you Google him, you'll find his books in all our good bookstores. He says that one of the best ways to grow your marriage is to kiss your spouse for 6 seconds every day. Thank you. Now, when you're kissing your spouse, that is a long time. And the kids will say, don't try it now, no. Now the kids will say, ooh, yuck, mum and dad, and all those sorts of comments. But there's nothing that communicates a far more powerful picture of security to your children than seeing that mum and dad love each other. So kiss your spouse for 6 seconds. Find time to regularly date your spouse. It's worth getting a babysitter. It's worth going out regularly on a date with your mate and spending time together. And if you Google great dates with your mate, I have some little cards that you can print out to help you to ask some really great questions while you're on your date, to make sure your date is purposeful. Things like, 5 things I like about you as my partner, and you list those. And then if I could change only one thing. Notice there's 5 positives and then 1 negative. What would it be? And you share that with each other. So a great way to grow marriages. Say, I love you daily. Fight for your marriage. And of course, for the churches, it's celebrate the marriages in your church regularly, run regular marriage enrichment programs, run great date with your mate evenings. This is great, where you put on a movie or something for the kids on the screen in the hall. You go around your local restaurants, showing what you're doing, and they'll give you discount vouchers. And then you send your couples out on a date while you look after the kids at the church. Powerful message, investing in marriages. Another thing to do is provide marriage mentors for young couples in your church. Things like getting an older couple up, celebrating their 40, 50, 60 years in some cases of marriage, and hearing their advice. Something worked? What worked? What piece of advice would you give? And hearing some of that. And sometimes bringing a younger couple and an older couple together and mentoring is a powerful way to help enrich marriages as well. Now, for those families where, for whatever reason, there are sometimes some really good reasons why a marriage falls apart. Let me tell you, I've heard some really hair-raising stories of why marriages fall apart. There's some good reasons why they need to be apart. But often when marriages fall apart, that's when the churches say, oh, this is too messy, and they back off. Everyone backs off and doesn't want to go near, I don't know what I should say and don't know what to say. But that's when the church needs to lean in and to be the mentors that family needs. So look for the families that need support, and as a church, make sure you a bit more intentionally place those 5 mentors into that family's life, because they need that then more than ever, and be the mentor for those families as well, especially the single parent families that may need either a male or a female mentors in those lives for those children. So be there for them. Invest in marriages. Finally, number 7, if you want to make faith sticky, and there's a strange correlation with this, it is involve your family in service together. Serve together. Develop some family traditions around service. When I was growing up in Mildura, we collected for the ADRA, the appeal. We collected for Red Cross as a family, and we collected for the Salvation Army Red Shield appeal. And our family had the same territory right behind Henderson Park, where we collected. So 3 times a year, we were knocking on those doors. We got to know them, and they got to know us. And our donations rose as we did the same territory every year, 3 times a year. But it wasn't just collecting. It was, we'll sit in Henderson Park at the end and we would share what had happened on our journey through our block that we did, my block. This person's wife died this year, or this person's lonely, or this person's sick, or we'll talk about the needs and we'll find ways to serve those needs as well. And we'll pray for those homes. It's not just doing the service, it's actually debriefing after the activity, which makes it sticky as well. Go on family service trips together. Might be doing a family Stormco or a family fly and build or some other trip you can do together. Encourage and support children to serve others in your home. That means doing the dishes, chopping the wood, whatever needs to happen. Doing things to serve others in the home is powerful as well. Then in your neighbourhood, your community and your church. It's interesting when Jesus is asked about the Greatest Commandment, New Testament, he starts off by quoting the Shema passage, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And of course when he says that, the good Jewish mind thinks, and that means to talk about it at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up, tie them as symbols on your hands and frontlets on your eyes, on your door frames, on your gates. So Jesus says that. And then he says the second is like it. Love your neighbour as yourself. So Jesus knows the power of the vertical and the horizontal in growing faith. He said it first. And research now is just discovering the power, the correlation between families that serve together and families where the faith is sticky, where the spirituality grows exponentially. So there we have it. 7 things that you can do to make faith sticky or stickier for our children and pass on a faith that rebounds from generation to generation down through to eternity. So thank you for having me. I hope you've learnt something from it. And here's the thing in closing. Don't think you have to do it all. And don't walk out of here feeling guilty. That's not what I'm here to try and do or say. What the research finally says, if families do one thing, so choose one of these, if families do one thing during the week to turn the hearts of their family heavenward, that's far more powerful than anything preached from this pulpit. So choose one, take it home, do it well. That's what it's all about. Thank you.